All right. As per usual, I'm going to lights like growing out of my head. Actually, hopefully that's not too distracting. Anyway, let's get some musica going here. Hello and welcome. So, this is I Do What I Want. I am your host, Hollis. And this week, we're going to do something a little bit different. So, as I announced on my social media, I'm going to, anyway, I'm obviously a little tired. Anyway, I am going to be reading you a short story that I wrote today. Before I get into that, I'll give you a little bit of context as to what's going on. I'm also going to mention that, obviously, actually, okay, I'm like, blah, blah, I'm word salading. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the word salad. At least I keep it healthy with my terminologies. So, announcements first. Let's do that first. Let's make it cool. So, first and foremost, I am a finalist in the Bookfest Awards. For those of you that follow me on social media, you know how excited I am. I'm finally submitting my books for awards and things, which I didn't do before because I just didn't. I don't know. I didn't really have a reason. But I submitted both To Save a World and The Queen Witch, which are the first two books in my Rashawn series, to the Bookfest Awards under the fantasy genre. And they were both accepted as finalists. So that means I have two chances to win, which is crazy exciting for me. I'm excited. Even if I don't win anything, even if I'm just a finalist, I'm still a finalist with both books. With both books. I'm really thrilled. They will be announcing winners and everything on October 21st. Today is actually October 14th or 15th, depending on where you are and when you're listening. It's going to be like October 15th, where I am in like 10, 15 minutes. So, yeah, in less than 10 days, I'm going to know if I placed or possibly won, but I have two chances to win. I am thrilled, absolutely thrilled, and a little flabbergasted in a positive way that I not only am a finalist with one book, but I'm a finalist with both books. So, obviously, you will be hearing about it. Probably you will be hearing some screams if I actually win anything. So yeah, there's that. I obviously will still be posting that I was a finalist in the Bookfest Awards for both of those books, and making the most of that and being really annoying about it. But I will wait to see if by any chance I happen to win. Maybe both of the books will place. I don't know. Maybe I'm feeling super greedy. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'm just really optimistic, but that's thrilling. Yay! The other things I want to tell you are that the first book in the Lost Beacon Chronicles, called Ignited, is coming out in November. I'm still trying to stick to that November 16th release date. I've got the cover design done. I did a cover reveal on my social media. There's a YouTube video, and the same thing is posted on my Instagram as a reel. So, go check that out, if you wanna see the cover for Ignited. I'm still editing and working on the page layout, but shooting for the 16th. It will be November, I absolutely promise you. Going to just make sure no crazy printing things happen this time and all of that, knock on wood, everything. So, yeah. Yeah. Ignited is coming out, which is the first book in the Lost Beacon Chronicles. Spare the Swallow which is available for sale, on Amazon and everything. That is the origin story of the character of Lucretia, who is the main character. She is the Lost Beacon. And to find out why I call her that, you're gonna have to read Spare the Swallow. Sorry, not sorry. Hee 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 hee. So, Spare the Swallow is the origin story. Go get that book, give it a read if you haven't yet, and then you can come in fresh with Ignited, which is her journey into anger. As you know, I enjoy psychology quite a lot. As I've said as a disclaimer, I am not a psychologist at all. I simply enjoy reading about psychology and psychological studies. I think the human mind is fascinating. But I am not in any way, shape, or form qualified to give any sort of advice or speak on things like that. I am just entertained and fascinated by it. And I enjoy learning about those sorts of things, which actually, and so the stages of grief are the Lost Beacon Chronicles and how the character of Lucretia is going through and cycling. And if you know anything about the different stages of grief, you know that you don't go through them linearly. It's like a smashed up pie. I don't know. Uh, and and you can bounce back and forth between them. You can be angry for a while, go into depression, then go back to anger and then be in denial, and that you can volley all over creation before you get to acceptance. There is no Everyone goes through them differently. Everyone has different reactions and processes when it comes to the stages of grief and their particular grieving process. And this is the whole Lost Beacon Chronicles book series is going to be about Lucretia going through her grieving process for what happened to her in Spare the Swallow, and which were really really interesting. Ignited is her journey into anger. So the anger is ignited within her, which is why I'm calling it that. Hee hee. And that's really cool. And I'm really excited to share that book with you. Pretty proud of it, honestly. Still like playing around with editing and making it pretty. But yeah, proud of it. And speaking of psychology, that also plays into the short story. So if you read the little brief description that I wrote, these short stories were something that I wrote back in 2020 as part of I was contacted, or I was working with Dr. Kobus Voister, and I hope I'm saying his name correctly. My apologies if I am not. Who is a psychologist in the UK, and he had developed and he still does this, the power therapy series, or the power therapy technique, which was his own therapy technique as a therapist himself to help his patients. And it was really interesting. Dr. Voister's a wonderful guy. He and I haven't talked to him in a little while, unfortunately, but he and I had some wonderful chats and good conversations, very good terms with him. Basically, he had this power therapy ser- um, techniques and everything that he uses. And again, it's all his. If you want to know more about it, please look him up. And it's in the description, so you can Google it and see. I know he is still practicing in the UK, and he has a lot of materials and things like that. So if you're actually interested in the power therapy program, please go look up Dr. Kobus Forster and see what he has to offer. I think that he's definitely a wonderful man, very kind-hearted, very genuine, and very intelligent. And I personally think, knowing what I know about the power therapy, really, really effective for people, because as he explained to me back then, his goal was to give people the tools to continue helping themselves after they've gone through some therapy, like, basically, like, giving them the power to lift off themselves, and giving them the proper techniques and tools to say, "Okay, I'm gonna help you at first as your therapist, but But afterward, I want you to understand these techniques, and I want you to be able to practice it yourself throughout the rest of your life to maintain your best mental health and stability, and, just emotional and everything else, which it's just such a noble thing. Really great guy. Again, I am not a psychologist. I am not a psychiatrist. I don't know anything about the in-depth details of it. Please don't ask me psychological questions, because I don't know those deep answers. But he had a wonderful idea where he wanted a writer like myself to write a series of fairy tales that would kind of string together as a series of short stories that demonstrated and represented these different power therapy techniques that he had developed. And so I started writing the series, and I got 5 in. I have 5 of these short stories, that I did, and all of the characters, the world, the plot, the story, all of that, that's all me. 100%. That is me. This is actually I actually ended up using an idea for these short stories that I already had, inspired by another Dungeons& and Dragons game that I played with my best friend, Ashley. Check out episode 1 if you wanna meet her. And, so the storyline and the characters and everything else, that's all me. And it was something that I had thought would make a wonderful story before even ever heard of, Dr. Voister. But then when he approached me and said, "Hey, I like your writing, I like what you're doing, would you be willing to do this series of fairy tales?" I just loved it, and it immediately spoke to me that these characters that were already created and I was already thinking would make a beautiful, book or series or something, would fit in perfectly with his power therapy techniques. And so I then use that, but just to be clear, that anything that is power therapy related, that is 100% Dr. Voister, not me. Any of the psychological techniques, that's him. But all of the characters, the storyline, all of the world itself, everything, that's me. So I created these, and I wanted to share the short stories that I wrote with you. And also, in sharing these, I'll read them to you. Like I said, there are 5 that I did write. We ended up not continuing with the fairy tale series because, frankly, the power therapy part was doing well and people were using it, but people just weren't reading the fairy tales to help them get through it. It just wasn't a tool that they were really utilizing. And we ended up, not continuing on with it, which it happens, but I'm really happy that the power therapy, I'm sure, works well for a lot of people, but a lot of people just didn't feel that they needed that fanciful element with their therapy techniques, which is quite understandable. But I really liked it, and I really enjoyed writing these. So I'm kind of thinking that I'm going to share them with you. And if you like the storyline that I've created, that maybe I will turn it into I'll revamp it to take out any, of Dr. Voister's trademarked content or anything like that from the power therapy, but use my story, use my characters and everything else to write more. So, yeah, I'm going to start with the first one in the series, which is called Picking a Fight with Yourself, uh, where we're going to see what that's what picking a fight with yourself is, one of the techniques that they would use, and you'll find out what that is all about. But I don't know. Yeah, let's get into it. Let's do this. And I will be staring at the computer screen this whole time because that's where the book is. Sorry, I have to like clear my throat and be a jerk. All right. Here we go. Amari sighed as she tucked her straight greenish blonde hair behind her pointed ear in an old habit of discomfort. It was something one could see her do quite often if they bothered to watch her. Most did not care to pay her any mind, however. The petite dryad woman, with long hair and nut brown skin, was not an outcast in her little Fae community, but she wasn't necessarily accepted either. Amari had long ago been labeled as a weird witch girl, and as such was tolerated so long as she kept out of trouble. The thing is, she desperately wanted to be a part of her community. She was of a shy and withdrawn disposition, since her mother died when she was a young child, but she craved more social interaction daily. Amari had only been 7 years old when her mother passed from a wasting illness. It had been a slow, expected death, but it was sudden. No child ever expects their mommy to die. Her mother had been her closest confidant and friend, and then she was just gone one day. Amari's father did his best to cope, but he was never the same after losing his wife. He was a long-standing pillar of the Fae community, and as such his depressive behavior over the loss of his wife was accepted and understood. The same emotional courtesy had not been extended to his daughter, however. Though her father did all that he could for his daughter, the truth was that he was suffering too, and they grew to simply commiserate in their pain together. An already shy child became even more withdrawn as other children shunned her since little Amari was frequently too sad for their games. So she threw herself into learning magics and potions. It was an easy thing to do by herself, and it was interesting. She would occasionally try to get potential friends interested or involved, but children are often thoughtless of others' needs. Instead, her attempts to share and be accepted by her peers resulted in further teasing and the nickname Weird Witch Girl. The thing was that Amari had in fact grown into a caring and kind young woman who wished to help others, in spite of the treatment she had received from them. She had focused her studies in magic on healing and pain relief. Her mother was never far from her thoughts, and the memories inspired her to develop a plethora of potions, salves, and healing spells to alleviate various forms of pain and illness. She even made them smell pleasant with hints of lavender, mint, rosemary, and other fragrant things. She was proud of what she had created and wanted to help better the community with it. Every day she would make her way to the central grove of the village, set up a booth of her wares beneath the ancient willow tree, and try to get those who passed to stop and listen. This was where she found herself now, constantly reaching out only to be put off or ignored. Excuse me, I couldn't help but notice you rubbing your temples. I have something that will ease the tension in your head if you'd. The pixie cast her an annoyed peripheral glance as they buzzed past. Amari tucked her hair behind her ear again. A few more Fae passed, a few more false starts, one hopeful pause, but it was over quickly. It was like any other day. There were a handful of Fae that had purchased from her, and most of them were pleased enough to come back, though they were few and far between. Most days she was just another part of the landscape to those in the central grove. The velvet dusk began creeping over the great canopy, and if on cue her stomach panged with a familiar hunger. It was time to pack up and go home. Tomorrow would be another day. Her small frame struggled underneath the weight of her wares as she walked the familiar path to the home she shared with her father. The giant redwood where they lived always seemed to have a warm, inviting glow emanating from its jolly windows. Their home was inside the magically hollowed out trunk of the living tree. Generations ago, her ancestors who built it used their innate dryad magic to speak to the great redwood and ask it to grow so that they could live inside. Redwoods are friendly and accommodating trees, and they like the company. The curved front door was left slightly ajar by her father so that Amari could simply push her way inside without freeing a hand from her burdens. Once inside, she placed everything down by the door to be picked up again in the morning and shut the front door securely. Her nose was tickled with the hearty smell of roasted yams and pumpkin seeds that her father was just placing on the table for dinner. The broad dryad man grinned warmly and wrapped his beloved daughter up in a familiar embrace as she came over to the table of intertwined living roots the redwood had made for them. Amari hugged her father back with the same warmth. It was good to be home. How was your day? He asked as they settled down at the table for three. Amari gave a non-committal shrug and murmured something about how it was all right, her usual response to the question. He nodded and they began to eat their dinner. Several moments passed of mild chewing and random sounds trickling past from outside. Amari, her father's tone was serious. This was unusual. She paused in her meal and gave him her full attention, suddenly feeling nervous and on the spot. His almond-shaped coffee-brown eyes held her same eyes for several seconds before he continued. I fear that I have failed you as a parent. I have not taught you how to get what you want. Oh no! You could never fail me, Papa! She blurted out almost as a reflex. She had long learned to protect her father's heart as he protected hers. He smiled and held up a large hand to let her know to calm down. You do not need to defend me in this. I am the one accusing myself, so listen. She pursed her lips and tucked the hair behind her ear before nodding for him to continue. I did not show you how to fight. I showed you how to retreat. I taught you how to survive, but not to succeed. In my own depression over your mother, I became passive in how I taught you to live in this world. Because of that, you are having a hard time now. So, let me try to amend the past damage I have done. How, Papa? What do you mean? She was confused, intrigued, and a little hurt for him all at once. It made her feel badly that he felt that he had done something wrong in raising her. She thought he was wonderful. I mean to teach you to fight, he returned seriously. Me? Confusion began to become the prominent emotion as she looked down at her slight frame. Besides, fighting wasn't something she wanted to learn. She wanted to help people, not hurt them. Her father chuckled softly at realizing her thoughts. Not with your fists, my dear. With yourself. Amari wrinkled her nose. Papa, you're making the sort of sense that's not. At that, he laughed heartily. His daughter did have a way with words. Because of me, you lack a certain social capability, sweetheart. You need to think of what they are specifically and take action against those tendencies you have that are holding you back. You have a good and proper fight with yourself. She blinked at him for a moment, feeling less confounded, now intrigued. It was an interesting concept, something completely outside of her nature. Her nature was to shrink away and accept how the world treated her, stay quiet so not to disturb others around her. So, you tell me, what is your biggest hurdle with becoming successful at selling your healing potions, sweetheart? She thought for a moment, giving the question serious consideration. Because the other Fae just ignore me. No one will stop and listen to what I'm trying to do for them. To them, I'm still just the weird little witch girl. She tucked her hair again. As she said the old nickname, it made her uncomfortable. Why do they see you that way? Her father pressed on, eager to get past the old wound. Because they always have. That is all I am to them. No, it's not. It's because you allow them to continue to see you that way. Show them someone different. Show them the Amari I know. She blinked again and took a bite of sweet potato to buy herself some time in the conversation. How the heck was she supposed to do that? It seemed an impossible feat to change the whole community's perception of her. It felt scary to consider trying. You need to assert yourself more. As he spoke, he leaned across the table and took her hand in both of his. Show them you are worthy of their attention. I already know you are, but they need to be shown. The only one who can show them that is you. But how, Papa? I already try to talk to people all day. No one listens. She was becoming a little upset, not at her father, but at the discomfort of the conversation. He patted her hand gently. I have an idea. In 3 days' time, I'm going to bring several of the community leaders to your booth in the Central Grove. I want you to give them a presentation about your wares and show them what an asset you could be to the whole community. Then, I want you to ask them to support you by suggesting those with ailments to come to see you. If you show confidence in your abilities and impress them, they will do this for you. Amari's eyes grew wide with an overwhelming fear. She felt paralyzed. She knew it was help, but it did not feel like help. She felt like she was going to fail miserably because they wouldn't listen to begin with. They would only show up and pretend to listen to humor her father. But Papa, no buts, he returned firmly, now squeezing her hand with purpose. In fact, I don't want you to even go to the Central Grove tomorrow. Stay home, work on what you will say to them and how you will say it. The day after that, you will practice it on those who pass your booth. After that, it's up to you to impress them. This is your chance, Amari. Don't just let it slide past. Confront your own anxieties and be the success I know you can be. Amari was stone still for several long seconds as she processed all of this. She felt so conflicted between paralysis and incentivized action all of a sudden. On one hand, she wanted to change things to change and become a successful healer in the Fae community. She wanted to feel accepted and appreciated by someone besides her father. On the other hand, change was terrifying and so uncertain. At least if she did nothing, nothing would change. There was a certain safety in that. Her father watched his daughter's face as she digested all of this information. She needed a moment, and so he would give it to her. He honestly wasn't sure at all what her ultimate reaction would be. She had become so entrenched in her shrinking violet habits, but she was so much more than that, and she deserved so much better. She deserved success. She deserved friends. She deserved to have a place in the Fae community. She stood abruptly, sliding her hand away from his in the process. I'm tired now. I'm going to go to bed early. That said, she hurriedly cheek kissed him good night and climbed up the twisted root staircase of her bedroom, or to her bedroom. He sat a moment with a heavy sigh at the table. She wasn't tired, but he knew she was already obsessing over their conversation. Whether she would take a positive or negative turn on it, he had no idea, though he wished hard for the former. He finished cleaning up and relaxed alone for the remainder of the evening. The next morning, Amari only came downstairs to grab a small bowl of porridge that she whisked back up to her room and did not eat with her father. He did have to allow himself to hope, however, when he realized she was not leaving to go to the Central Grove. She stayed in her room all day long, only appearing to gather more food from the kitchen and run upstairs with it. He decidedly took it as a good sign and did not bother her at all. That evening, as her father finished preparing dinner, she appeared at the kitchen table. She looked a bit scruffy from her day spent as a hermit, but nothing a bit of combing wouldn't fix. Are you staying for dinner? He asked half jokingly. She smiled at him, a good sign that she was in good spirits. Papa, I'd like to practice speaking in front of you first, she stated somehow confidently and awkwardly at the same time. A rare talent. He placed a steaming plate of eggplant and tomatoes down in front of her and a larger one for himself. Well, I would love to hear what you have come up with. Thank you for inviting me to listen. She smiled and flushed a little as she began to eat her dinner. The meal was silent. Amari was too preoccupied over analyzing every nuance of her speech, and her father was enjoying watching the expressions change across her face as she pondered. They cleaned up together under the same pretense, and they never returned to the table. And then they returned to the table. Her father sat in his chair, Amari sat in hers. He gave her a look. What? She asked, already nervous to be presenting to the one person she could be herself around in the whole world. "Aren't you going to get your potions and things for this?" he asked with bemusement. She popped up from the table. "Right! Yes!" Scurrying over to the entry, she grabbed her things and went about setting them up on the table in front of her father. Then she sat down again. He cocked a raven eyebrow at her with a smirk. "What? You should really be standing for this." She rolled her eyes, but did stand up. "Geez, Papa, you're so picky," she grumbled. "Just pushing you out of your comfort zone, sweetheart," he returned with an encouraging smile. "Okay, go ahead and start whenever you like. Actually, wait a second." He stood and walked over to the other side of the room and then passed right by the table with a mild glance. She was confused again. "Papa, what are you doing?" "I'm just passing by. Get my attention." It was a challenge. He backed up and came in for another pass. "Excuse me, sir, I was wondering—" He looked at her, but kept walking. Amari looked very sad. "Why didn't you stop? I'm just trying to show you my presentation. This isn't funny, Papa." "I'm not being funny. You didn't grab my attention. If you can't do that, you don't have an audience. Try again," he said firmly. Then he reset for another pass. This repeated several times, each time with Amari trying a slightly different phrase, but still failing to earn his attention. On the fifth try, in complete exasperation, she simply blurted out, "Hi, how are you today?" He stopped and smiled. "I am well, thank you. And you?" She was so stunned that she almost lost him, but quickly recovered, as she did not want him to reset across the room for a sixth time. "I am also well, thank you. I wondered if you wouldn't mind, that is, do you ever have aches or pains?" He laughed and then quickly got back into character. It wasn't the best start, but it was enough, so he continued to encourage her. It was a very silly and productive evening for father and daughter as she stumbled through, feigned confidence, and tried to remember everything that she wanted to say. All in all, it helped, and it felt good. The next morning, Amari awoke with the pep of a spring rabbit, ready to confront her confidence and social issues head on. She popped out of bed and ate her breakfast with a smile. Her father grinned through the morning as well. It was such a joy to see her spirits high and flying. He silently prayed to the Mother of Nature that she would not become too discouraged today and that this mood would continue into tomorrow. At first, the Fae passing through the central grove almost seemed to be put off by her new sociability. The quiet little dryad witch pitifully trying to sell her potions was a normal sight, but she was different today. It wasn't unpleasant at all, but it seemed odd at first that she was behaving so socially. Some Fays scurried by faster than usual to avoid any awkwardness with her, but slowly others began to stop and have a chat. Frankly, Amari was accustomed to the rejections of those that hurried by her booth. It was when they stopped and engaged with her that made her nervous. She wasn't used to that at all, but she persevered. She silently kept reminding herself that if she ever wanted to be anything more than the weird witch girl in this community, she had to change their perception of her. Overall, her day was going better than expected. There were loads of awkward moments she wasn't prepared for, but managed to get through most of them without the person walking away from her. Amari found that it was probably every 5 minutes or so that she had to give herself a mental kick in the shin to remind herself to keep smiling and keep talking. It didn't matter to her if they bought anything or not. Most of them did not. What mattered to her was that they were stopping and giving her the opportunity to show them she wasn't just some strange animated piece of the landscape that was meant to be looked over. She was a part of this community, and she had something to offer it as well. Amari was exhausted after a day of all smiles and talking and trying so hard. She looked up to the sky, and even though it would be at least an hour or more before dusk, perhaps she could pack up and go home early. She had done well, but she was so overwhelmed by all the newness she was forcing herself to exhibit. Sighing, she gave herself another silently reminder that these changes she was making would take a long time to feel right to her. She began to pack up her booth and to head home. A wave of relief hit her as she turned away from the passing Fae and focused on the familiar task. An uproar of shock sounded in the central grove, like a loud collective gasp. Amari whirled around to see what was happening, and as she subconsciously tucked her hair behind her ear. At first, it was just a crowd of Fae gathering around something. She couldn't tell what, so she got closer and began to push her way through. Being slight of frame, it did not take her much to get to the front of the inner circle of the crowd, and she was shocked to see a bleeding, injured satyr being shouldered by a companion. She did not think, she simply acted on instinct. Amari ran back to her booth, grabbed several potions and salves. She was surprised to hear herself sternly telling others to move back and let her through as she approached the injured satyr. She realized when she got close that his companion was also injured, but to a lesser degree. Ignoring the companion for the moment and focusing on the more seriously injured one, Amari got to work. It looked as though he had been stabbed in the shoulder as well as his furry haunch for on the left side of his body. She wiped away the blood using the skirt of her dress before putting the salve that would close the wounds on the exterior of both. Then got him to drink a potion that would magically restore any blood he lost as a result of the wounds. She held her breath as she waited the long seconds to see if everything would work as intended. The wounds began to close and color returned to his face. He blinked at her without recognition. Amari wasn't surprised. Most of the Fae didn't really know her. I am Amari, Aaron's daughter. You should be all right now, she said with what she hoped was a comforting voice. What happened to you? That was the question on everyone's lips, of course. The crowd whom Amari was just realizing were still gathered around collectively held their breath to hear the answer. Their little Fae community was so peaceful. Such things didn't happen here. King Ramos wants to leave us to leave our land, the satyr's companion answered darkly. We had gone to the human town to trade and found a gathering of soldiers preparing to come here and push us out. Things became heated. We fled. The words hung in the air heavily like a thick, cold fog. The crowd was silent. The Fae had always known their ancestral home had become part of the human kingdom generations ago, but there was an unspoken understanding all this time that they could stay so long as they adhered to the human kingdom laws, which they did. It seemed that the king was changing the rules. Quiet confusion settled over the crowd as they stared at Amari and the two satyrs in the central grove. What was about to become of them? And that is the first little short story in the what was the power therapy series, which I hope you enjoyed. I hope you liked it. The next episode, I'm going to go ahead and read the second one. Like I said, I did have five that I wrote way back in 2020. They were published on Amazon as little ebooks and available for sale. They're about 6 or 7 pages long each via the power therapy. So if you want, you can, of course, my name, Hollis Joe McCullum, is on them too. So if you go to Amazon and you search for my author name, then they also will pop up if you're interested in the ebooks. But that's it. And if you like them, let me know. Let me know in the comments. Feel free to DM me on Instagram or whatever, and let me know what you thought of this short story and how you enjoyed it, because I really enjoyed the characters. And the next one is called Bodyguard. We're going to be meeting other characters, and it's gonna turn into a whole crazy situation, as most stories do. And of course, obviously Amari's a fairy at the Fae. A dryad is a tree spirit, for those of you who are not familiar with what different Fae are called and everything. So yes, she's a little tree spirit. That's why they live in a beautiful living redwood and all those great things. So Yeah. So the next episode will be November 19th because the podcast is now just once a month. And I will do some more updates. Hopefully, Ignited will be available for sale at that point, and we'll just talk about all those little updatey thingy things that I like to talk about, and hope that you will purchase my books and love them, and read them and review them if you please review them. That's a very very important thing that I need as an indie author. Please and thank you. But yes, so November 19th will be the next one. Obviously, I do these live, but then it's on my YouTube and my Spotify channel for, ever. So you can go back and listen at any time. Another quick thing I want to add is, as many of you know, I'm very good friends with Alara Dunn, who is the author of The Magic Locker, The Witch's Curse, which is doing very well, an excellent fantasy book. It's like a modern fantasy realism about some bullied kids who, particularly one bullied main character, Ellie in particular, starting high school, and they find a magic locker and things get weird. I'm reading it right now. I'm really enjoying it. Obviously, I will review it when I'm done because that's what friends do. But I'm genuinely enjoying the book. It's excellent. But Alara Dunn and I, who have collaborated on a couple of things, we are going to be collaborating on some more things as a couple of fantasy authors who are also cosplayers and, pretty nerdy. So look out for that. Alara Dunn and I are coming at you, and we are going to be having some very exciting little brand announcements and, things of that nature. So look out. Fantasy authors having fun and being ridiculous. That's what's about to happen. And we cannot be stopped because there's literally no one to stop us. We're adults and people don't get to tell us what to do. Oh, snap. Anyway, I genuinely hope you enjoyed listening to the little short story, and I hope that you will continue to tune into the podcast. Um, Again, next month I will be reading Bodyguard, which is the second short story in the series. You get to find out more about why the Fae are being attacked and who King Ramos is and that whole situation. So please tune in, come see me, and I appreciate you.